Good afternoon, everybody. Do we feel like we have everyone who was in the queue joining the call now?
David, I would yield to Trey, but I believe we do.
Okay. Well, let's just jump in first with great appreciation for everyone joining us. The Council of State Governments has been doing SSL for decades now. It was one of the original programs that manifested CSG's desire for states to learn from each other. SSL has become many things to many different people, which is why this orientation is so important to get on the same page with regards to how we use SSL to engage our members and its utility for policymakers across the country. First and foremost, it's important to know that as SSL moves forward, it is a process that's designed to be transparent and to be fair to all involved. As we reach out to the public sector members to serve on SSL, we reiterate to them that inclusion of a particular piece of legislation, either on the docket or to be approved by the SSL committee, does not constitute a judgment on the merits of that particular piece of legislation. It does constitute a judgment on whether or not that particular piece of legislation meets the criteria that have been established for SSL. And in today's call, we're going to talk a little bit about the history of SSL. We're going to talk a little bit about the process that is used and the criteria, so that as you think about what your interests are with the legislation that might appear on the docket, you'll be familiarized with exactly how you might work to engage members of the SSL committee to determine how your interests can best be protected. Keep in mind that while this orientation is designed as a quick overview, we certainly welcome any questions at any time. Our dedicated staff is interested in making sure that you're not surprised by something that happens when we're together in Raleigh in December, but that if you're just uncertain of something, trust us, there's no stupid questions. We're happy to give you our best judgment about where something's at and allow you to decide how to pursue your particular interests before the SSL committee. We're excited that at this particular time in history, there are so many transitions and transformations, disruptions that are going on in state government, that it seems like a time that is ripe for harvesting these kinds of new enactments to capture these innovations. And that's why we're excited to continue to provide SSL as one of the components of our service to the states. With that, let me jump into a real quick orientation overview. As I've already mentioned, these are the things we hope to cover today. And there will be an opportunity for questions at the end of our orientation session. So please feel free to interact or raise questions as we move through this. We'll also be joined, we believe, by at least one of our public sector co-chairs, but Jerry Bassett, who has been the sage of Alabama, is with us today. He serves as one of the troika of folks who help oversee this and run this operation. We are indebted to Jerry for his many years of service to the SSL process. And he approaches this in a nonpartisan, non-ideological way, as so many of the nonpartisan staff of our legislatures approach the policymaking world. He's trying to facilitate a process that works with no particular bias. So with that, I want to just turn it over briefly to Jerry if he has any remarks he might want to say as we begin this orientation. And then I'll turn the orientation over to another new member of our staff that I think you'll enjoy getting to know and work with as we work through this process. Tina Zeff is our new director in our development team. She's heading up our efforts to strengthen strategic partnerships and to grow revenue, to support core functions of the organization. And I know Tina is very excited for the opportunity to meet you and work with you on SSL as well as other important programs that interface with our associates. But Jerry, I'll turn it over to you for a brief welcome, and then we'll go to Tina.
Thank you, David. I appreciate it. As a bill drafter, one of the reasons I've always been interested in SSL is, as a bill drafter, it makes my job a lot easier. If somebody else makes a mistake in a different state, we don't have to repeat that error. If somebody does something right in a different state, we're interested in doing something on that issue. It makes my job a lot easier. And every bill drafter in the country, it makes your job easier. There are some things that go through the committee that I would walk precincts to kill. But that's like anything else in the legislature. For a nonpartisan staff person, sometimes you just bite the bullet. I think over the years I've been on the committee, and as David said, it's a long time. I don't remember any partisan or policy issue bickering on the committee. It may just be because my memory is not what it used to be, but it really is one of the few places, particularly the last 4 or 5 years, where people don't care what letters are behind the member's name. And it really is I always thought the process. For the new members on the committee, welcome. I think you'll enjoy it. And I think you'll meet some interesting people. I'm going to be happy to answer any questions, but you can turn it over to somebody else.
Thank you, Jerry. We appreciate your leadership. And I'm pleased to have you meet someone that I know you'll be working with in the future as our CSG associates interface with our particular policy programs. But I'll turn it over to Tina for her remarks as we set up this orientation. Tina, thanks for being
Thank you, David. Yes, it's a great way to spend a Monday afternoon. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tina Zeff. As David told you, I am one of the newest members to the CSG family. I started about 32 days ago, so I'm going to call myself tenured. And I'm just going to spend a few minutes talking with you, and then we'll get on to the real reason we're all here together. So I am the Director of Advancement or Development. I also have a fancy title that uses the words Strategic Partnerships and Impact Investments. But basically that title really just talks about working with good folk to do some good work to advance the common good. As I said, I've been here only 32 days, but CSG Advancement does have a vision. We do want to continue to work with the right nonpartisan partners, those good folk I talk about. And we want to meet each other kind of at the intersection of all that great work that we can do together, using both things like sound public policy, government innovation, financial investment. And we want to put all that to yield a high rate of return or impact for the common good for all. One of the things that I have noticed in my short 32 days is that there is a cornerstone example of doing this type of work. And it does intersect strategic partners with also impact investments, right? And that is the Council of State Governments Shared State Legislation Committee. I literally have spoken to staff that I was introducing myself to and said, we have a gem here. And according to David and the history of SSL, you found that you had a gem a long time ago. So that's nothing new to all of you. But SSL is the premier example of empowering communities in addressing issues of both regional and national significance. But it also provides lawmakers with peer-to-peer learning, a network of information sharing, and innovative policy solutions. And all of that's from my state leaders and our associate partners. This unique program is literally what I consider a gem to the CSU work. But as David also mentioned, we need to expand our revenue activities. It is not only about membership or partnership, but it's truly about leaving that legacy of democracy for future generations. And we're going to have to do that through some unique ways. So we're going to be focusing on transformational investments, both from the private sector, but also from individuals and, as you know, grants and foundations. David has said over the last 32 days multiple times that we have unlimited potential to connect all kinds of donors or investors to our mission of both informing, inspiring, and empowering our state officials. That is literally the vision that we're going to carry forward over the next 3 years of our strategic plan. The resources that donors choose to invest with CSG will help us build stronger states, and from that, a stronger nation for both us now and in the future. So that's a little very high level idea of what CSG advancement, vision, and development activities are going to look like. I welcome each and every one of you to reach out and talk to me about ways that we can partner to do the most good. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Tina. We've got 5 slides in the deck, so this will go quickly and we'll get to your opportunities to interact with us. But I'd ask Cassidy and Asia, as they walk us through this, these are the brain trusts behind our stewardship of this program. But if you would introduce yourselves and the role that you play in this particular process, and then take us through the history and purpose, as well as the process and the criteria. This is the guts of how the whole program works.
Absolutely, and thank you, David. Before we get into that, I do see that Representative Cindy Abrams has joined, our other chair, and I want to give her a moment to speak and welcome everyone before Asia and I introduce ourselves and get into the SSL program. So Cindy, I'll pass it to you.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Okay, good. Well, I just want to say welcome and happy to be here. Jerry, I will totally agree with you that as a member, I completely value 100% our legislative service committee here in Ohio, and the drafters of all of our, hey, here's the idea. Can you put this in writing? Yes, back and forth, back and forth. So if we can save some time and not reinvent the wheel, I think that's always something that's important. And I will agree with the bipartisanness of the committee. There were things that would never pass. I would smile and say multiple times, this would never fly in Ohio or the Midwest, and we would all laugh, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, you know, it's about looking at the drafts themselves and is it solving a problem? And again, happy to serve as a co-chair again, and look forward to seeing everyone later this year.
Thank you, Representative Abrams. We so very appreciate you and your time and your leadership with this effort. I know that the last SSL session was a great success. So I'll introduce myself first, or Asia, actually, let's let you introduce yourself first as a project manager, and then I'll go on because I lead into the very next slide. So Asia, I'll pass it to you.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Asia Cruteau. I'm the project manager for the SSL project. I've been at CSG for close to 5 years now, and this has been a project that I was always very interested in, and then had the opportunity to step in and join the team. So very excited to be here and looking forward to another great meeting this December.
Thanks, Asia. Hi, everyone. My name is Cassidy White. I am a senior policy analyst here. I've been with CSG for a little over a year now, but much of my time has been devoted to the Shared State Legislation Initiative. It is wonderful work, and I know that individuals that we've worked with in the past have really talked about the beneficial use of the information that's shared, and we're so excited to teach you a little bit about what that program is and how you can participate. So Asia, if you'll go to the next slide, we can get started. So we would really want to highlight for you all the history of the program, the purpose, and in particular the players, and some of them are you. So launched in 1941, the Shared State Legislation Program, which was previously called the Suggested State Legislation Program, is both a member-driven process and an annual online publication detailing topics of current importance to the state. So we want to reiterate that we do not promote or advocate for the enactment of state legislation. That is much of the reason why we changed the title from Suggested State Legislation to Shared State Legislation. And we are not drafting model legislation. Rather, the goal of this program is to facilitate the sharing of legislative ideas among CSG members. And the committee members are state officials and their staff. You'll see individuals from legislative research commissions from many of those states as well. And they are appointed by their respective state appointing authority each year. Next slide, Asia. And now we'll get into the process. So the committee, as I mentioned, comprised of state officials and staff, meets annually to review legislation adopted in the state. So what does that look like? Individuals will go to the CSG website, and we'll get into that in a little later, and they submit relevant bills to us. We review those bills, Asia and I, based on the criteria, and we will prepare a docket for the SSL committee. So the committee reviews that docket during the annual committee meeting. What they do is we provide the docket to them beforehand, and they'll read through all of the bills, recognizing the criteria, and then they will get together during that one meeting and select legislation to be included in the SSL volume based on the 9 criteria. Their determinations can either be to reject the bill, include the bill, defer the bill, or include the bill as a note. So I'll explain those a bit. Reject just means it's out. They think for whatever reason it did not meet all 9 criteria, and it must meet all 9 criteria. If they include the bill, that means that they think that it does meet all 9 criteria. Again, it is not a discussion of whether or not we think it's good policy per se. It's really based on the criteria. It's a nonpartisan process. Deferring the bill means that the committee may want us to take into consideration additional research. So what has been the impact of the bill? Maybe there's a particular portion of the bill that individuals want more information on. We've had a couple of bills from the last session that have been deferred. And then including as a note means that the bill, it meets the criteria, but perhaps they want it to be connected to another bill that was included in its entirety. They think that it's similarly related to another bill that was included in the docket. And I will share that we had several bills this past year that were included as note, usually being tethered to another bill that had been included, or because they thought that the aim of some of the bills were similar. So then those volumes are published online on our CSG website for dissemination to state leaders and staff. And as I mentioned, they meet once annually. That CSG SSL committee meeting will take place at the national conference in December. Each year we have established a sort of deadline for consideration for that year's committee meeting, and we've determined that to be August 31st. However, I want to reiterate that you can submit a bill at any time, and if you submit it after the August 31st deadline, it will just be considered during the next docket cycle.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Cassidy. I'll just note one additional thing. When the committee might decide to include something as a note, it could also be that we see a lot of omnibus legislation that gets submitted sometimes. So the committee could decide that a particular portion of the bill, usually whatever portion is highlighted by the submitter, perhaps does meet the criteria or is close to meeting the criteria, but they don't want to include the entirety of the omnibus bill with pieces that are not relevant to that. So that can also be a situation in which the committee would decide to put it as a note in the volume. So we'll move on to the SSL criteria. You've heard about the process. So when the committee meets at the December National Conference meeting, they will discuss each piece of submitted legislation on the docket against these criteria. So there are 9 items that they consider, and some of them are quite straightforward, and then some are the ones that are a little bit more subjective and what sparked the conversation among the committee members at the meeting. So the first and most important piece of criteria is that it must be enacted legislation. And so for that, we mean it must have been signed into law. at the time that you are submitting it for consideration in the docket. And if when you send that, you know, it can sometimes take time before, you know, it is signed by the governor and then put into state statute. So if you are submitting something, you know, you can just put a link to the most complete version. When we share these pieces of legislation on the docket, that is what we do. We will share the link to the most final version of that law that exists at the time. The next piece of SSL criteria is that it must address a current issue of national or regional significance that the states are facing. So that is very broad. It kind of can fall into a lot of different policy topics, but generally, as long as it is a salient issue that states are dealing with, states, regional, or the entire nation are dealing with right now, that would meet that criteria. The third criteria is that it provides a benefit to bill drafters. So just the bill has to provide some benefit to the state for passing it, which is fairly straightforward, but anytime that there's a question around that, the committee will discuss and they will make the decision on whether or not it meets that criteria. The fourth item is providing a clear, innovative, and practical approach to a problem. So in the bills that we see come through on the docket, the committee wants to see that, you know, it's well thought through and structured in the bill, how this piece of legislation will address that problem that was spoken to in the second criteria piece. The fifth item is that it represents a comprehensive approach to a problem that is relevant to other states. So there's a little overlap with that second piece of criteria, but really this is focusing on the comprehensive approach. You know, we don't want to encourage siloing among different areas when things have overlap. So we want to make sure that pieces of legislation that are proposed are comprehensive and have thought through the different impacts that the bill might have, so information like that. And again, this is another one where the committee will discuss and decide if it meets that piece of criteria. Number 6 is having a logically consistent structure. You know, we've all seen bills or maybe items that didn't even make it to being proposed in a bill that maybe is not well structured and clear as a piece of legislation in itself, regardless of what it is addressing. So we want to make sure that all SSL bills that are being considered have a good structure to the bill itself, so that all of the committee members can look into it and read through it and understand what the aim is for that piece of legislation. Similar to that, number 7 is just that the bill uses clear language. The committee does not want to include anything that is very unclear on what the aim is or how that is going to be addressed. So we just want to make sure that everything is clear and well structured. Number 8 is that the bill can be available in a similar form in no more than 10 states. And we make that cutoff because more than 10 states, we kind of consider that at CSG going from an innovative approach to a best practice. If this is a piece of legislation that over 10 states have adopted, there's room there to say, okay, well, this has been working in other states, and now this has kind of become a best practice or a standard. And since the purpose of SSL is really to focus on that innovation piece, we want to make sure that whatever is being considered is still relatively new and would be considered innovative. And last but not least, along those same lines, we don't consider anything that is more than 2 years old at the time of submission. So again, just to keep everything fresh and looking at new innovative solutions to problems, we have that time limit on it. There have been cases, I will note, however, that if a bill is submitted, say you submitted a bill this year for consideration at the 2023 National Conference for CSG, if that bill was deferred and come the 2024 meeting, it is now over 2 years old, it will still be considered for that cycle because it was deferred by the committee. But for new submissions being considered per cycle, it needs to be less than 2 years old. And with that, I will hand it back to Cassidy to continue with the submission process.
Thanks, Aisha. So I'm sure many of you are interested in learning how to submit, as you are able to do that. And Margaret will get into how you can participate in the next slide. But to submit a bill, you can visit our CSG SSL webpage, which is linked here. Alternatively, you can go straight to the Submit Legislation tab. And you will have to provide the following information: the bill title, the bill number, the state where the bill was enacted, the date of enactment, and the link to the enrolled bill. And then additional information that's not required, but particularly helpful for us as we're gathering information and for the committee when they're reviewing the bills themselves, is the bill summary. That is really, can either be your take on what you think the bill does. A lot of individuals end up adding the bill summary directly from the legislative website that they found the bill. Press releases and news articles also tend to be particularly helpful, as they sort of, put information in more digestible format for what the intent of the bill does, et cetera. And then comments. And that might be your particular take on why you think that the bill is, it should be included, why you think it meets certain criteria. We've had individuals in the past, I know it has been particularly helpful for us, is that they'll list each of the criteria and they'll say why they think the bill meets each of those criteria in their own comments. So with that, I will turn it over to Margaret, and she will explain to you all how you can participate in this process.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good to see you all, and looking forward to seeing you all on the road this summer at CSG regional meetings. But a little bit about how you as CSG associates can engage and participate in this SSL process. We'd love for you to consider it a tool in your government affairs toolbox. And use it to your benefit, but also as you're the boots on the ground in the state capitals, whether it pertains to your work or you just see it as an innovative bill, we encourage you to consider submitting it through this process, through the link that Cassidy just shared. Bills that are submitted for consideration, you can submit now until August 31st. That's the first and easiest step to engaging in this process, is to submit bills. Another way to engage is to that you as a member are on our distribution list. And once the docket is released, we will distribute it directly to you. That's typically about 4 weeks prior to the CSG National Conference starting. In addition to sending you the docket, we will send you the SSL committee roster to review. And that will include the contact information of the committee members so that you can reach out to them, connect, send letters of support for support or opposition to a piece of legislation on the committee. Another way to engage in this process is during the SSL committee meeting. While membership on this committee is limited to state officials, you are welcome to testify during the meeting, and you'll notice when you join us in Raleigh this December, that around the room there will be microphones. And as the committee approaches a bill that you would like to make comments on, you can step up to a mic or a designated area, and the co-chairs of the meeting will call upon you at the appropriate time to speak towards the bill. And again, it's not based on any reason you want it submitted to the committee. It's based on the committee's criteria. And so I highly recommend that as you create your comments, that you keep that in mind as you address it. Another way that you can participate is to support the SSL committee reception. The committee hosts a reception the evening before they convene, so that thanking the SSL committee for their participation and for looking at all the bills, and CSG associates that are interested in sponsoring and attending that reception are welcome to do so. Matthew, Terry, and I are happy to send you more about what that sponsorship includes, if that is of interest to you. So please don't hesitate in reaching out, but it's a great way to meet and connect with the members of that committee prior to the official convening of the committee. You can also serve as a resource to CSG staff on SSL notes. As Cassie and Asia noted, sometimes a note is included with a bill that is included, and we might need your insight on that. You're welcome to search the CSG websites on past volumes and that have gone through the committee to see what's passed and what has not passed. We're happy to provide support should you need that as you do research. And last but not least, as a benefit, you can share the legislation with state officials, highlighting that a bill did or did not meet the nonpartisan criteria of the CSG SSL committee. That can be another tool in your toolbox as you go into states, talking with state officials on bills and work that you're working on. So with that, I will pass it back to Asia for Q&A.
Yes, thank you so much, Margaret. So as she said, that is the end of kind of everything that we had for you all. I do see that we have maybe some people have submitted to Q&A already. So I will go ahead and start off with the 2 questions that are in the Q&A chat. Otherwise, please feel free to put questions in the chat, or once I'm done answering these, just unmute yourself and ask your question. So the first one that we have in the Q&A chat is there a way to find out what legislation has been submitted in the past? Yes, there absolutely is. We are currently working with our CSG communications team to get past volumes on the website, and hoped in the future that we'll have a much more interactive process for searching through previous volumes. We don't currently have full dockets published on the website. We'll always publish the docket that is upcoming once it is available for viewing. We put that on the website before the meeting. But if there is a bill that, say, was submitted but not included, just rejected outright, you can reach out to us, myself or Cassidy at the CSG team, and we can check against our records on previous dockets to see if it has already been submitted and was rejected in the previous cycle. But otherwise, we hope to have all of the volumes back up to date on the website after we've just done our big website revamp in the near future, and we will send out information once we have gotten that all up to date on the website to both the committee members and associates. The next question in the Q&A box is, does CSG track whether bills that got included in an SSL volume then go on to pass in multiple states? So the short answer to this is we are going to. In the past, we've had a lot of different efforts on different longstanding programs at CSG, and Cassidy and I are working this year closely with Tina and the development team to start making plans to get tracking in place so that we can more accurately get an idea of the impact of SSL on state legislatures. So we are hopeful to have that in the works within the next few months. And then as soon as that process is fully established, we can share that out with folks. All right, let's see. I do see in the chat. Oh, that was just Cassidy. All right. If we have any other questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A or unmute yourself.
I'm not sure they can unmute themselves. I could be wrong, but you can request to be officially unmuted by Trey. I think he can do that.
Thank you. Apologies.
Yeah. If you have a
Trey
question, you hit the raise your hand function at the bottom. I can unmute you.
Perfect. Otherwise, again, feel free to put in the chat or the Q&A. Whatever. And I'm quite comfortable holding a long facilitator's pause to allow for questions. So take a moment and send us anything. And if we don't get anything in the next few minutes, we can wrap up.
For those who might not be typing, we hope to see you at the CSG National Conference in Raleigh from December 6th through the 9th. So mark your calendars.
All right, I'm not seeing anything pop up in the chat or in Q&A. I want to confirm, Trey, do you see any raised hands or anything on your end?
I do not.
All right, well, if anyone does have questions that come up from this meeting and you just want to send them our way later, again, feel free to reach out to us. I'll also add my email address to the chat for everyone to have on your records. But with that, I will pass it back to David for closing remarks.
Thank you, Asia. And I want to say a special thanks to Asia, Cassidy, Tina, Margaret, and Trey for helping coordinate all of the logistics that make this call possible. Certainly want to also, in absentia, thank our co-chair speaker, Steve Yeager from Nevada, and Representative Cindy Abrams from Ohio for joining us today, along with Alabama's Jerry Bassett. The SSL process is like everything CSG does. It's only going to be as good as the people involved in it. And so much of what we talk about at CSG when we think about our programming is that it's inviting a conversation, seeking engagement. And certainly that's how we see our private sector partners in this process. We're never afraid to have our associates and private sector friends at the table. They can help us understand unintended consequences of particular pieces of legislation and often provide real-world context to those who are considering whether a piece of legislation meets the criteria of SSL. So as we work to connect and inform, to inspire and to empower and engage state officials to advance the common good, we see SSL as just one of many ways in which we seek to accomplish that mission. Please stay in touch with us. The docket will be produced. We'll be here in December in Raleigh before we know it, but we hope to cross paths with you often before then, hopefully at some of the regional meetings that will be held this summer, whether it be in Hollywood, in Detroit, in Toronto, or in Charleston. We're looking forward to answering any questions you have about how you can connect to what you care about and advance your interests through many of the platforms that we have here at CSG. With that, we'll wish you a very happy and safe summer. But like I said, hopefully you know that we're just a phone call, an email, or a text away. Feel free to reach out if we can ever be of assistance on SSL or any other matters. We're very pleased to have you as part of the CSG family. Thanks for all for joining us and spending this time with us, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon. Take care.